Ethan Gilsdorf.
Hello. Thank you, Howard. Hi. Hello. How are you? Hold on. Thank you very much, Carissa, for that nice introduction, and thank you, Emily and April and Carissa, for reading, particularly Emily and April, who I've known at other junctures and moments in my professional and non-professional life. It's just a pleasure to hear everybody read. I wrote this book, and I'm not going to read anything from this book. Partly because there's very little here about my sex life, so I did write something sort of specifically for this event, but I couldn't resist mentioning a couple things in the book that, or a couple of things that are related to the book, namely my love of Dungeons and Dragons, and that will feature somewhat, well, I wouldn't say prominently, but D&D makes an appearance in this piece. So watch for it. What else do you need to know? I don't know. I've never read this before. As I was asked to read something that was untested, unproven, could be a total disaster. But I'm glad you're here with me to experience this disaster together. I think we'll be fine. But I'm curious about your thoughts, feedback, suggestions, or complaints. I have no problem. So this is an essay. I was asked to talk about an early or perhaps first sexual experience. So indeed, I've bravely gone where no man is, or where this man has never gone before. Since actually you were mentioning in your piece, Emily, 1984. I mean that year features very prominently. All right. So this is actually, I don't know about the title. The temporary title for this piece is Astral Projection, the Silver Cord, and Other Lessons. Today's lecture is about 3 themes. There will be 3 lessons. It will impart 3 wisdoms. The first, that sex can thrive even under the most adverse conditions. Perhaps it must. The second, perseverance. The third, loss. There will likely be a 4th or 5th or perhaps an infinite number of lessons and themes, subjects, topics, and theses. I will do my best. Along the way, I will raise arguments and concerns, and I will use several threads and motifs. The thrust will be multifaceted, many-headed, diverse, far-ranging, and exploratory. We'll try to get to as many of these as we can. So here's another lesson, or I should say here's the first lesson, or maybe the 4th lesson. That what happened, that the way that it happened, surprised me. I did not lose my virginity according to plan. Oh no. I lost my virginity to a chubby, brown-haired, brown-eyed, patchouli-reeking woman named Rajay. I believe this was 1986. I was 20. I was attending a certain alternative liberal arts college in western Massachusetts, and I was freshly heartbroken. Rajay and her mother had recently escaped from the ruined and shamed community, aka commune, aka cult, the one founded by none other than the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. You remember the Bhagwan. In Oregon, the Indian mystic and spiritual leader had bought a ranch, previously known as the Big Muddy Ranch, and renamed it Rancho Rajneesh. This is true. Where it was home to some 3,000 disciples. The neighbors were not pleased. Now the Bhagwan was notorious for his large collection of Rolls-Royce automobiles. According to him, he needed to amass these cars and other riches because of their grave material weight, which kept him rooted to planet Earth, to reality, to the prime material plane, so that he would not float off to Mars or astral project or end up on some far-flung ethereal plane. Now, to me, being an avid Dungeons and Dragons player, this makes perfect sense to me. You all know that astral projection is a 9th level spell. While you are on the astral plane, your astral body is connected at all times to your physical body by a silvery cord. Now, if the cord is broken, you are killed, astrally and physically. Luckily, very few things can destroy the silver cord. 1, the psychic wind of the astral plane. 2, an attack from an astral dreadnought. I'm not making this shit up. Number 3, a blow from a Githyanki silver sword. So during his time in Oregon, the Bhagwan was said to be paranoid about nuclear Armageddon and also AIDS. Sex was rampant at the cult, but he insisted that his followers use condoms and not kiss. He was supposedly also addicted to Valium, and apparently dictated 3 of his books while under the influence of nitrous oxide, which was administered to him by his private dentist. On October 23, 1985, a federal grand jury issued a 35-count indictment charging the Bhagwan and several other disciples with a conspiracy to evade immigration laws, and 1 count of having conspired to have his followers enter into sham marriages in order to acquire U.S. residency. In the end, the Bhagwan was given a slap on the wrist, fined, and asked to leave the United States. He returned to India in 1985 and settled in the town of Pune. Weirdly, I ended up in Pune in the winter of 1988, but not because of the Bhagwan or Rajay. That is another story. So back to Rajay. That was the name that the Bhagwan gave her. I think her real name might have been Karen. I honestly can't remember. It matters, and it doesn't matter. The truth was, I was heartbroken when I met her, and she smiled, and she lived on the dorm hallway of some friends of mine, and therefore, I ended up spending a lot of nights plumbing that dark, snowy winter with her at the end of the Reagan administration. Now, I admit that my moral upbringing was suspect, scattershot. Church teachings were not in the lexicon. Ask me who Matthew or John the Baptist was, and I would give you a blank stare. My mores, my blueprint for doing good, was absorbed from watching The $6 Million Man, Mr. Rogers, and Happy Days. Not Moses, but Yoda. Given those facts, you wouldn't think that I would have given a rat's ass about who I had sex with or why. But despite my lack of moral education, I had still painstakingly mapped out in my Dungeons and Dragons trained mind a series of conditions, charts and tables and outcomes about that supposed future potential, maybe, sexual encounter. That I would love the girl, of course, that was the first condition. That the sexual act would be real and true and meaningful. And that the heart would be involved as much as the penis. That and some hint of long-term commitment or maybe even marriage. That it might play a role. Okay, that might cross my mind. But not with dear sweet Rajay, all big brown cow eyes and expert hands and birth control at the ready. In her single room, and we all had single rooms at this certain alternative liberal arts college in Western Massachusetts, she would light the candles and anoint the oils to her body. On her bookcase was a small photo, a photo of the Bhagwan, despite his disgrace and the cult's shameful implosion. She even had a medallion on a string of wooden beads, and on that medallion was a photo of the Bhagwan's vaguely smiling smiling, gray-bearded guru face. She took off the medallion. She took off her clothes. I had no medallion. Despite playing D&D for many years, I had no medallion. I was just a dork. But I took off my clothes, and she popped in her diaphragm like it was part of some ritual. "Here," she'd say, "let me show you." Sure. Sounds good. Show, not tell. That's the key lesson, class. And the moral of the story: sex can thrive even under adverse conditions. The Bhagwan had taught her well. Eventually, I got the hang of it, and I, too, learned how to astral project. I forgot my heartache. There is no try, do or do not. And I did her. Now, for the lesson about loss, you need to know about Amy. This is about 2.5 years earlier. I met Amy the fall of my senior year in high school. She was my first girlfriend. Aside from my mother, Amy was the first member of the female human species I had ever kissed. Amy was slim and blonde and physical. Amy was slim and blonde and played volleyball. She was physical, but we'll get to that in a second. And played volleyball. She had spiky 80s new wave hair and wore fuchsia satin tops when she wasn't wearing athletic wear. Her dad had died on the operating table during some routine procedure, an appendectomy perhaps, or colon cancer surgery. He had died a year before I had met her, or perhaps 2 years before, or perhaps just the year before, or the semester before. I don't recall. Amy did not seem too terribly unhappy about her dad's death, or she did not let on. Perhaps she was still in shock. My own mother had been destroyed by a brain aneurysm a couple years before that, but she lived, and her stroke-ridden body and mind hobbled through my adolescence, strange and disturbing and occasionally hilarious, a mystic in her own way. I was still in shock. But by senior year, I had acted in the school musical, and I wore a family member's old army coat and affixed subversive anti-Reagan pins to the lapel, and I wore penny loafers, ironically. I was coming into my own. I had found my courage, and somehow I had asked Amy out on a date. I have no idea how this happened. So it made some cosmic sense for Amy and I to connect, but we did not speak of this. Show, not tell. Amy and I decided we were not ready for sex, that is, having intercourse. But we did just about everything you can do without actually inserting a penis into a vagina. Even though her mom was a member of a conservative evangelical Baptist church, and even though I'm sure she frowned upon premarital sex, she gave me and Amy vast swaths of time after school alone with the house to ourselves. Her family had a mustard-colored Volvo station wagon that could be seen, but hopefully wasn't actually seen, parked on dead-end roads near cemeteries in the rural areas of our tri-town area. I remember particularly well a pair of her form-fitting striped jeans. They were blue and white pinstripe jeans. Makes no sense to me. And she'd be wearing those jeans, and she'd be wearing a t-shirt or maybe some long-sleeved sports jersey that had wicking abilities. We'd kiss and fall to the couch horizontally, burrow and grind and rub and end up on the floor of her family room or bedroom, or even once on the kitchen floor. And we'd rub and grind until I would come, or my dick got sore, or her crotch got sore, or both. Or she got tired, or would just say, "Hey," and would wave the white flag. Kleenex and paper towel were usually involved. Our after-school homework assignment was tough, but we ate it up. We'd grind so hard, so want to be inside each other. It seemed like fire might erupt there on our crotches. Or we might give birth to a small black hole. It might emerge there, pulsing, or we might open up some extra-dimensional space from the friction of all that contact. Me and my D&D playing buddies, we are always developing these sort of strange Monty Python and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy inspired theories. And we had this theory about that when doing the laundry, the heat and the spinning action of the dryer would actually open up a portal to another dimension. Kind of like in Dungeons & Dragons and the magical item known as the Bag of Holding, whose interior extra-dimensional space holds more than the bag's exterior size would suggest. Into that dryer's extra-dimensional space, lone socks would pass into the ether, and lint would travel back in their place, thus explaining where all that lint really comes from, and explaining the lost sock in the dryer phenomenon, and thus preserving the balance of the universe. Me and Amy's grinding seemed to be a related idea, a related theory. My ex wanting to be in her Y, something about solving her coefficients and sines and cosines, an equation of sexual frustration. But there was this twist, you see. Amy told me she had never had an orgasm. I was strong, and my mom was weak, and Amy's dad was dead, and I wanted to run and fly and have sex and slay orcs and astral project, and I wanted to be the one to give her that orgasm. I wanted to slay and slake Amy. It was not easy, my friends, my students. There was no roadmap or teacher's guide to pilfer. The solution was not given in the Dungeon Master's Guide. But that didn't stop us. Roll for orgasm. There should have been a table for that in the DM's guide. Some table that factored in her armor class and my sword. My special ability to pick locks, open bras and clasps, and unbutton jeans and other traps. So, how was that? I'd ask after a particularly grueling session, my hand cramping with palsy. Were you, close? Maybe, she'd say. I'm not sure. After almost 6 months of trying to slay and slake her, a lucky break. I graduated high school in the spring of 1984 and would be college-bound by September, but Amy still had 1 year to go. So we had one summer together. I worked at the town dump, where my job was to run the trash masher. The old coot who had run the place, who was there most of the time, had a little bunker, and in the bunker, he'd stashed some Hustler and Penthouse magazines at the bottom drawer of an old green metal desk, like the ones they had on MASH, what I used to call the Sherman T. Potter desk. It wasn't just the images of naked women I reveled in, it was the forums and Q&As. Someone had written in asking for advice about cunnilingus. Bingo. Amy's family had a camp on Lake Winnipesaukee, and weirdly, her mother invited me to come along with her on their family weekends that summer. While Amy's mom and younger brother were asleep and I was supposed to be asleep in the room with Amy's younger brother, I'd sneak into Amy's room and get to work. I had my project. The water lapped against the dock outside on the lake, and I lapped against Amy's dock inside. The bed buckled, and Amy bucked and whined, and I kept working away down there, my tongue inventing its own geometry and algebra and long division, its own algorithms and theory of relativity. And on the second or third night of experimentation and exploration, eventually, a breakthrough. A bang. The Big Bang. An extra-dimensional space had opened. Amy, astral projected. Victory! Treasure! Experience points! I loved her as much as a 17-year-old boy could love a girl for the first time. I loved her improvisationally, freakishly, fully. That summer was bliss. In the fall, I went off to a certain alternative liberal arts college in Western Massachusetts, and Amy entered her senior year in high school. It was the age of payphones and snail mail, many sad calls and impassioned letters. A rift had opened. Amy dumped me at Thanksgiving. The silver cord was cut. More gin. Back in college, I spent that entire winter screwing Rajay. Through March, even into April, until the daffodils and lilacs returned, I don't know. We had sex often and every night, and sometimes we were awake to see the sun rise. I would avoid her during the day. We were not boyfriend and girlfriend. Oh no. Summer came and I blew her off. Rajay went to Texas and then returned the next semester, but I found ways to be evasive. Invisibility is tricky at a college of 1,000, but I consulted my charts and tables and I found success. I wore my elven cloak. Eventually, Rajay transferred to some normal school and I lost track of her. Today she's probably a banker or a sports therapist, or maybe she's running an organic farm in Eugene. After Amy broke my heart, she decided to go to the neighboring traditional liberal arts college in Western Massachusetts, about 3 miles down the road. We kept in touch sporadically, carefully, ill-advisedly. One summer between my sophomore and junior years, I went to see Joe Jackson play at Great Woods, aka the Tweeter Center, aka the Comcast Center, with Amy and her new boyfriend. The three of us. A triple date. I had a knack for self-torture back then. But self-torture and self-humiliation and self-other things will have to be the theme for another day. Another lesson, my students, my friends. The bell is about to ring. In conclusion, 1, sex can thrive even under the most adverse conditions. Perhaps it must. 2, perseverance. You must persevere. 3, loss. There must always be loss for the hero, the scientist, the researcher, the teenage boy, the teenage girl to travel forward. Also, there has to be sex. I'm sorry that we have run out of time. Tomorrow is another day. I'll see you in class next time. You have your homework, your essay on astral and ethereal encounters. Please also read Chapter 5, Travel in the Known Planes of Existence. Along the way, you may raise your own arguments and concerns, and please use several threads and motifs. Your thrust should be multifaceted, multi-headed, diverse, far-ranging, and exploratory. We'll try to get to as many of these next time as we can. Thank you.